the best way to kind of describe the Twitter story is Game of Thrones with nerds.
This is the untold story of Twitter.
True story of money, power, friendship, and betrayal.
Is there trouble at Twitter? Is there turmoil in the management ranks? Is there difficulty growing? Are you having trouble making money?
But there was one man who came up with the idea of status updates.
Jack Dorsey's really the one who had the idea.
Well, that's the story that's been told.
But as the platform skyrocketed to global fame, the man who came up with the idea of Twitter was pushed out and erased from Twitter history.
You have these 4 founders, and ironically, 3 of them will disagree and say there's only 3 founders of the company.
He walked away with nothing, while others made billions.
These 4 men who were there at the beginning of Twitter, not only a rocky start at the launch of Twitter, but things really got nasty between the friends when it came to figuring out who was the best person to run the company.
But how did the dream of connection turn into a nightmare of power struggles? To find out, we need to go all the way back to the beginning.
Well, I had a job for a short time, but again, I was always assuming I would start my own thing. So I started a company called Blogger. It was a side project. And that was really the first thing I did that ever turned into anything. I started that in 1999. And it created Blogger really because I wanted to post to my own website. I had a personal website. I wrote some code to make it easy to publish to the website.
And that was one of the big epiphanies, like, oh, this completely changes the nature of web publishing for me as a person, because I can now have a thought and in 2 seconds it's on the web. That's new and interesting. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of planted the seed.
Maybe other people would like this.
And I was like legitimately excited about blogging. I really thought the democratization of information was a big deal.
Letting people who don't know how to code and create websites and express, this is it. I was so into it. I was writing articles about it. I was constantly writing about it on my own blog.
And I was following closely what Blogger was doing, and I was really admiring the work that Blogger's co-founder Evan Williams was doing.
And I just was like, basically intellectually, had an intellectual crush on the guy. And I was like, this guy is totally, exactly what I want to do.
So the end of 2002, Google called. So our very first meeting at Google, we went down and we sit down with some of the corp dev people and David Drummond. And we're like, oh, so we're thinking about partnering. Maybe you want to search the blogs, or we can put the search on Blogger. And they're like, yeah, all those things sound interesting, but we're Google, we're hundreds of people, and you're 6 people. So partnering doesn't really make that much sense, but maybe you want to just come and run Blogger from here, like be part of Google. Mm-hmm. And so that was about it for that meeting. It was like, Google wants to buy us? What does that mean?
And then what happened was Blogger, the company Blogger, got acquired by Google in 2003.
And I just wrote him a note and said, I feel like I'm the missing 7th member of your team, or something like that. And
he said, how'd you like to come out to California and work at Google and work on the Blogger team?
Because it turns out he had been reading my stuff all along, and I didn't know that.
And he felt like I was the missing member of his team too.
And so
I said, that's cool, that sounds great.
Got a job. There's a whole story to this, which is that Larry and Sergey were like, no way we're hiring this guy. He didn't even graduate college, let alone, because they were hiring CS, PhD guys.
Yeah.
But he managed to pull some strings and get me in there.
Anyway, so the point is, I didn't meet Evan until he picked me up at the airport to go work at Google.
Crazy.
It was weird.
Wow.
We'd never met. He picked me up in his yellow Subaru and he was like, hi, I'm Evan. And I was like, I'm Biz. And we just liked each other right away.
And so I worked at Google and it was awesome. It was Google pre-IPO and all kinds of crazy stuff was going on. I would go into a room. One time I walked into a room and there was a guy with all these DVRs all taken apart and all hooked up and all these TVs playing. And I was like, what are you doing? And he was like, I'm recording everything that's on TV. And I was like, all right, sorry. because I was always getting lost. I was always like, where's my desk? And there was another time I walked into a room and there was all these people like just at these weird units scanning books. And I was like, what are you guys doing in here? And they're like, we're scanning every book in the world. And I was like, all right. What the hell's going on here? And Sergey was going around in like these bouncy shoes. He's like, this is the future. It was weird, but it was awesome.
I was basically employee number 800 at Google. So to me, it was a huge company. Compared to the Google you know today,
55,000.
It was a tiny tadpole.
But then I was in a company that I wasn't even at the top of the company. I was just, it was someone else's thing. And so I knew immediately that I was going to stay as long as I wanted to get Blogger on the right track. I really cared about what I had built, and then I was going to leave.
And then I was faced with another existential type question of, well, did I come out here to work at Google or did I come out here to work with Evan Williams?
I left Google to continue working with Evan Williams.
To go start, I think what was Odeo?
Yeah,
is that right?
Yeah.
Like, how did you know that that was the right time to quit your job again and go start a company, with Evan?
A friend of mine who was my neighbor at the time named Noah Glass, who later helped just start Twitter, he was doing audio things, and I left Google with the intention to take a break, and he just kept coming over to my house, and so we ended up co-founding Odeo together when podcasting, before there was iPhones.
And that wasn't a great experience for me. I think I was a little bit too eager to get success number 2 after Blogger.
Apple added podcasting into iTunes, and we thought, good place for it. Now what do?
And so what we're doing is we're going to make this even easier, because you're not going to have to go download other applications and get all sorts of stuff together to make this happen. We're going to build it right in to iTunes and iPod, so you can subscribe to any podcast, and we're going to make it really easy. And so right into iTunes. Very simple. But we're also going to build right into the iTunes Music Store a podcast directory, so that we're going to list thousands of podcasts, and you'll be able to click on them, download them for free, and subscribe to them right in iTunes.
At the time, Evan actually came up with this genius sort of pivot for the company where we would totally win at podcasting. And we went to dinner that next night, and I said, your document is amazing. There's one problem. And he said, what? I said, do you want to be the best in the podcasting business? And he said, no. And I said, neither do I. And then we were like, what are we going to do now? We don't even care.
Because what we realized was we didn't listen to podcasts, we didn't make podcasts. And then whenever we were like, we really should use our own thing. And we would set up a mic between us, and I'd be like, you go, and he'd be like, no, you go.
And I realized at that point that it just wasn't going to work for us, because we weren't emotionally invested in the project. We didn't really it was a thing that we thought other people would like, not for us.
So then we knew we needed out. So then he told the board, I don't want to, I'll find another CEO. And they're like, no, we invested in you.
And our board was like, well, do you have other ideas? And
the first company I had to actually write a resume for, which was Odeo, a podcasting company. And I had not a care in the world about podcasting when I joined the company. I also learned that no one else cared about podcasting at the company. So the company had no direction, it had no passion for what it was doing, but it had an amazing group of people. And the month after I joined, iTunes launched its podcast directory. So it pretty much killed our entire path. So morale was kind of confused, and we didn't know what direction to go.
So Evan, to his credit, had this great idea, and we were a small company, and he said, look, we raised money to do podcasting, but I want a skeleton crew to keep Odeo going, and then I want the rest of you guys to pair up and just do something you think is cool. And I had become really good friends with this guy, Jack Dorsey, and
Evan Williams said to Jack and I, you know what, you guys seem to be getting along really well. Why don't you just take a break, take 2 weeks, and build something just totally different, just something fun, something you guys really want to do.
Jack presented an idea that he'd been tinkering around with for a number of years that was based around sending simple status updates to friends.
And At this time, SMS got really big in the country, and I just fell in love with the technology and its constraint of 160 characters.
And so we brought it up with Evan and I, who had we had worked on Xanga, we had worked on Blogger, and we had done these social media tools.
You know, what if we just do the simple thing of being able to be anywhere, use SMS, send it out, and it goes out to all these people in real time.
And he said, guys, is it anything? Is it cool to know that? And we suddenly thought, oh, this idea is perfect for that, because you would be able to set those away messages via SMS, which would make them even more interesting because you wouldn't be tethered to your computer. You'd be actually out doing something interesting and texting about it. And so
they gave me 2 weeks to build it and one other programmer. And in 2 weeks, we had everything set. It was actually like 13 days.
This was the original sketch. And that was the inspiration. And then we took 2 weeks.
Showed it to the team after our initial 2 weeks when we built the prototype, and the team thought it was really stupid. But Evan said, like, okay, people didn't like it, but keep working on it. I think it's a cool idea. So we kept working on it, and the initial use cases we anticipated were just rudimentary social networking type stuff, you know, like that you would just use it among friends. And there was this one moment during the prototyping phase where I was ripping up carpeting in this little 400 square foot house we had bought with what little money I got for down payment from Google, which put me right back into debt. And I watched Bob Vila as a kid, so when you rip up the carpet, you reveal a beautiful hardwood floor underneath, and so I was doing that, and there was no hardwood floor underneath. So I was basically ruining my house, and I was sweating, and I was like, oh, this sucks. And then my phone buzzed in my pocket, and it was Ev, and his tweet was, sipping a Pinot Noir after a massage in Napa Valley. And I just laughed out loud at the incongruence of the two things, and my wife thought I'd lost it because I was swearing before that I was laughing. But the point was, I sort of had this like sort of out-of-body experience, like, wait a minute, I'm laughing out loud at something that we've built. I must be doing the right thing. It's making me joyous. So we must be onto something.
Forget blogging and MySpace. If you really want to stay connected, there is a new service, and supposedly it is the next big thing. It's a name you can't forget. It's called Twitter.
It's stupid and lame and small.
Yet master blogger Robert Scoble can't keep his fingertips off.
It's real addictive.
And users are popping up all over the globe.
You can see how fast they're coming up here. I mean, while we've been here, there's been constant flow of new Twitters on the Twitter map.
That's right. The latest cyber drug of choice is called Twitter, an addictive concoction of blogs, Google Maps, personal websites, and text messaging, all bottled into one network and delivered to users in real time.
It was March of 2007, we went to this conference called South by Southwest, which everybody knows as a film and music festival, but it also has like sort of a bunch of dorks get in there first, and there's an interactive festival before it all starts. And we had a lot of those types of users early on Twitter. It's actually funny, you can see like all these like nerds leaving the hotel as all these cool guys with like guitars and leather jackets are checking in.
We had a good amount of early adopters in the Bay Area that all went to this place at the same time. So we had a nice saturation of Twitter users at this one concentrated place.
But we came here, and this was the first time we saw Twitter in the wild. You know, this was the first time we saw a high concentration of people using the service all at the same time in the same place, on their mobile phones and on their laptops, etc. And I walked into a room, I walked into the back of one of them, and I saw like a sea of laptops, all of them opened up to twitter.com. And I was like, whoa, people are using our thing. You know, you have all these panels during the day, so of course it was being used for that. If people were saying, I'm in this panel, it's not very interesting, is there another one that's more interesting? And then somebody would send up another update on Twitter like, this one's really good. And so people were kind of the people in the hallway were like, what's going on? Because people were switching panels, and they were like, dude, what are they doing? And that's one of the first times we realized that we had invented a new form of communication, because there was no such thing as real-time sort of device agnostic, whether it didn't matter whether you were on your cell phone or your computer. updates that went out instantly in real time to a group of people such that they would all receive them at the same time. And
one thing that happened that just blew my mind was I heard a story about a guy,
and he was at a bar, and the bar was very loud and crowded.
what he really wanted to do was talk with his fellow nerd friends about what they were working on. So he sent out a tweet that said, "This place is too loud. Whoever wants to talk about projects, let's meet at this other pub down the street. It's very quiet."
And I think he had like 100 followers or something, and a good number of them were at least half of them were also at South by Southwest in Austin. Now, in the 8 or 10 minutes it took him to walk to that other bar, hundreds and hundreds of people had descended upon the bar, and it was filled to capacity, and there was a line out the door. What had happened was, his tweet went to his followers, they sent out a similar tweet, and so on, and all of these people swarmed to this location.
Filled to capacity, there was a line around the block. Plan totally backfired. What had happened was he had tweeted, that tweet got retweeted, etc., and all these people went there. But my God, like when I heard the story, I said, I think we have something new here. And the metaphor or the image of a flock of birds moving together around an object in flight came to mind, because this is something that looks incredibly choreographed and incredibly practiced, but in fact it's not. It's rudimentary communication among individuals in real time that allows the many to suddenly become one, behave as one, and then go back to being many again. And the thing that was so amazing was that I realized there was no such thing for humans. There was no, even though this exists in some ways in nature, like with schools of fish and with birds and with slime mold and ants and other things, there was nothing like this that people could use. And yes, it was a party, but what if it had been an emergency or some other important thing? And so that really, really got to me.
And so that's when I said, wow, we have something here. It was literally, I think 2 days later, we ran back to San Francisco and we took a plane. But we founded the company, Twitter Inc. Up to that point, it was just a project. And you know, that was it for me. That really sold me on, you know, this is something that has merit.
I just signed up for my Twitter account. So all y'all who know about Twitter, make sure y'all fuck with your boy on there, you know what I'm saying? Twitter.com/RealWizKhalifa.
You've got some new thing that you've started, Twittering?
Yeah, I started Twittering. Right now I'm at like 100,000 people that follow me.
Uh-huh.
I'm like the #1 guy on Twitter right now.
Really?
Yeah, so
Twitteronia, as Shaq calls it, a world floating through cyberspace where professional athletes and average fans can connect on a whole new level.
You had the first verified account on Twitter.
I was sitting on 24th and Camelback at the Ritz-Carlton outside, and I said, okay, let me see how this thing works. I was like, hey, this is the real Shaq, and I sent the picture. I got 2 Laker tickets. If you want these tickets, come see me now. And I seen a guy do a Dukes of Hazzard 360 in the middle of the street, like 10 seconds later. See the guy park. I seen another guy running out the mall across the street. And I was like, wow, this is really, really powerful.
The new wave is here, it is present, and it is ready to explode. We can and will create our media. We can and will edit our media. We can and will broadcast our media. We will censor our own media ourselves.
Well, it certainly happened sooner than we expected. We have been talking about this obviously for months, if not years. We had thought that Twitter could file for its IPO sometime before the end of this year or early next year, but it has in fact happened now.
I'm Jessica McGinn for IB Times TV, reporting on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. Today is a very exciting day. Twitter is just releasing their IPO on the floor. They chose the New York Stock Exchange over the NASDAQ, which is a big deal. This is probably the most highly anticipated IPO since Facebook in May 2012.
The thing that happened during the Iranian revolt was we had advertised and it turned out that downtime, for us, it was late at night in Iran. It was during when some important thing was happening. I forget exactly what. And a lot of people came to us and said, hey, can you postpone that? Because it's a really bad time. And including some folks from the State Department who reached out. At first, this was early, I think. So we were flattered and surprised by this attention, but we were also nervous about that because we thought it was critical that we are viewed as a neutral party. And Twitter is a global system, and the last thing we wanted to do was look like we're an arm of the U.S. government. We decided to put off the maintenance, but and still to this day, I've talked to people who, from Egypt and other places who, partially because of that, but partially just because we're in the U.S., they assume we are controlled by the government. And that's something that we always want to, it doesn't help us. We want them to trust our system.
Actually, one funny story that comes to mind is that there was this one morning that I came to work, and my phone voicemail was totally full. My email inbox was totally full, and it was all these major publications, and they all had essentially the same question for me. Mr. Stone, what was your role in the Moldovan revolt yesterday? And I was like, okay, Wikipedia, Moldova, what the hell? And I was so tempted to write them back and be like, well, I wasn't happy with that regime, so I used the button over here that I have. And in truth, it just highlighted the fact that there were so many things going on. There's so many things people were doing that we weren't going to be able to control them or anything. And the lesson, and then it just grew and grew and grew from there. And so many things happened.
Do you believe that Twitter overthrew the Egyptian government?
No, I think people did that.
Right, but don't you think Twitter facilitated that?
Yeah, and I think the telephone helped bring down the Berlin Wall.
Right, right.
But I don't think they said the telephone brought down the Berlin Wall.
I love the fact that Occupy Wall Street was a hashtag for months before it was a movement, right? It started with the hashtag Occupy Wall Street, and it took like 2 months before people were like, hey, what if we actually occupied Wall Street? Like that's such a good hashtag, we should go do it, you know?
If let's say someone's evil and they're like some white supremacist. Yeah. Do you take those things down? Or?
No, we don't. We err on the side of freedom of speech at all times. We have very strict set of policies and rules that say if it's a specific violent threat on another person or if it's unlawful, stuff like this, things that are made easily, decisions that are made easily. Otherwise, we always err on the side of freedom of speech. We believe, again, that the open exchange of information can have a positive global impact, and that information can be good or ill, and it should all be out there.
When I was physically threatened on Twitter, you guys refused to take down the tweet. When I was in Venezuela, I was physically threatened by a high-profile individual, 10,000 people tweeting at me, you guys do nothing. Twitter, by definition, is a biased platform in favor of the left. If you have a rule in place that specifically adheres to the left ideology, you, by default, are enforcing rules from a biased perspective. When you have people on your platform who've committed a crime and you don't ban them, I say, well, that's really weird. And then when you have people on your platform who say a bad, naughty word, you do ban them, I say, oh, that's really weird. I don't click the notification tab anymore because it's basically just harassment. Somebody made an allusion to me being a homosexual, and I reported that, instantly gone. Of course, Twitter is going to enforce the social justice aspect of their policy immediately. But when someone actually threatens me with a crime and incites their followers to do it, nothing got done. I see the manipulation of Twitter in violation of our elections. I see you openly saying, we recognize the power of our platform and we're not going to abide by American norms. I see Democratic operatives in Alabama waging a false flag campaign using fake Russian accounts, and the guy who runs that company has not been banned from your platform. Even after it's been written by the New York Times he was doing this. So we know that not only are people manipulating your platform, you have rules that remove honest American citizens with bad opinions who have a right to engage in public discourse, and it's like you recognize it, but you like having the power.
This is a new vector of attack that people have felt that I don't want to be on this platform anymore because I'm being harassed and abused and I need to get the hell out.
Well, people harass and abuse me all day and night. You don't do anything about that.
The best way to kind of describe the Twitter story is Game of Thrones with nerds. It really is.
You have these four founders, Noah Glass, Evan Williams, Jack Dorsey, and Biz Stone.
And ironically, three of them will disagree and say there's only three founders of the company. But they all kind of have discrepancies with who did what.
Jack Dorsey's really the one who had the idea.
Well, that's the story that's been told. Noah Glass and Jack Dorsey are drunk, and they've been out drinking, and they've been dancing at a rave, and they are talking about these ideas about loneliness and how they want to solve that and allow friends to connect. And Jack has this idea that is, what if people could do that through text messaging?
Yes, the status idea. Kind of.
They had these hack days, and one of the hack days, Jack had talked about this idea of being able to update your status from anywhere. But when it came up, no one had paid attention to it because it wasn't, Jack couldn't explain it. Like it wasn't, it wasn't completely formulated. Yeah. But what Noah did was Noah took it and said, yeah, but that's not very human. It's not, it's almost like computers talking to each other or fax machines. What if you were to come up with these ways to humanize it? But it was Noah's idea of connecting with friends that made it what it ended up becoming. And then what happened was they took those two concepts and then they coupled it with Biz and Ev's concepts of blogging and creating a stream of characters and this and that and the other. And essentially that was what Twitter became. Noah also came up with the name Twitter. He was the one that came up with that idea. But what happens is Noah starts becoming the guy who's known for Twitter. Like he's the one that's running it essentially. And Jack Dorsey doesn't like that. And
as they started to build this thing, Noah was going through a divorce. He was going through a really difficult time.
And one afternoon, Jack goes into Ev's office and he says, I want to talk to you confidentially. And he says, I can't work with Noah anymore. If he stays, I'm quitting.
And Jack and Ev essentially kicked him out.
And Noah gets pushed out of both of the companies that he helped start. Yeah, so Jack starts telling this story about the creation of Twitter, that Jack had come up with it years earlier on his own, and he literally from that day forth never mentions Noah's name in any kind of interview or anything.
And then Jack took over, and Jack was not a seasoned entrepreneur in any way, shape, or form. He was running the company into the ground. He'd never managed anyone before. Jack Dorsey and Evan Williams are in a conference room, and Jack says he's actually getting in trouble with Evan Williams because he's taking a lot of credit for the company. And Jack says, you've got to change your title from inventor of Twitter on his Twitter bio. And Jack says, well, I did invent Twitter. And Ev said, you didn't invent Twitter. I didn't invent Twitter. And it was just chaos. And eventually the board members, which was Fred Wilson and Bijan Zabet, and Ev decided it was time for Jack to go. And Jack was fired in the Clift Hotel nearby in 2010, in October 2010.
Ev ran it. Jack had a coup to kick out Ev.
And then Jack spent the next 2 years developing a revenge strategy and had Ev kicked out of the company 2 years later.
And wow. Jesus.
The night that Noah was fired, Noah had no idea that Jack was involved in his firing. And
you're kidding.
The night that Noah was fired, Jack had tweeted that he was going out for, or Noah had tweeted that he had gone out dancing with Jack and drinking. And so I asked him, I went back to Noah and I said, hey, did Jack ever mention anything about you being, about his involvement with, you being pushed out? And he goes, no, he said it was Ev, and, Ev had everything to do with it. But I also had emails with Jack's name on, involved in the firing of Noah. So they all pushed each other out of the company in a power betrayal battle. It's almost like Game of Thrones meets the nerds. It's really dramatic. They were all very close friends at one point in time. Jack Dorsey and Evan Williams pushed out Noah Glass, the first guy. Then Jack Dorsey took over, and then he was fired by Evan Williams, and then Jack. And this is a big story in the book. Jack helps, pull together a coup with the board, and they push out Evan Williams. And now
this is the crux of the story is that they all were there when it started. They were all in the room together. So today, fast forward after dilution and all these other things that happen with startups, Jack is worth about $3-4 billion.
Not bad.
Ev is worth about $4 or $5 billion. BizStone made about 50 to 100 million, and Noah Glass got nothing. One of the stories that I actually learned the most was when all these guys got together and started this business. They didn't start it as a business. They started it as a cure for loneliness. When they started Twitter, they all were going through a personal crisis. Jack was single and alone and didn't have any friends. Noah was going through a divorce. Biz and his wife were completely broke. Ev was petrified that he'd be known as a one-hit wonder and would never do anything great again. And they all had these things, and also the employees, and they thought that this company was going to be able to connect them with each other, and that they could say, I'm going to bed. And their friends on Twitter, which is the first night they ever used it, they said, have a great night, sleep well. It was like a big dormitory. And I think as the product evolved and exploded in the way it did, they all turned around at one point or another and realized, okay, technology doesn't connect us in the ways that it's going to cure loneliness, but it does connect us in other ways.
One of the things that Noah said to me when I spoke to him for the book, he said, I wasn't looking for anything other than friends. And he said, the quote that he said that I thought was really beautiful was, more than fame and more than fortune, I just wanted friends.
And of course, that's the thing he lost.